Well, we're gathered here today to ask Rin Para a few questions about the new project that she is in the process of creating, university. Oh, I'm feeling nervous. I'll just ask you these questions and you can do your thing. How does genuine change happen?
Uh, well, the first question is, does genuine change happen? And so there's always argument for that. Depending on the perspective that you're approaching something from, I approach everything from the premise that there's a divine design to everything. Whether you're a Christian or otherwise, there's this orchestrating thing that creates reality. And so the paradigm that or the premise that I approach things from is that the end is the beginning of the story. So the end result is actually the premise and everything is just catching up. It's like you were designed to be the fully formed human and you come as an incompletely formed human and you slowly grow into that thing that you always were. That's why children think that they're brilliant and already know all the answers. They already know who they are. And then all these things happen to you in life. You get confused about your identity and how you're supposed to happen, and all these constraints get put on you. And then you spend so much of your middle years trying to deconstruct all those constraints and free yourself again. You go through a midlife crisis, and then slowly you work towards authenticity and personal expression. And the reason for that story arc is because you came technically, maybe not consciously, but technically you came already knowing what you were designed to be, and the whole rest of your life is playing catch up to that expression. And so,
Hmm.
from that perspective, change doesn't really happen, revelation happens. And so the language that I often use is revealing yourself because who you were was always under there. It's just covered up by so much other stuff. You can't remember what it is, you can't recognize what it is. And so the premise of a lot of my programming and the premise of this entire university platform is the revelation of the authentic you that always was, but may be forgotten. Um, and so from that perspective and that premise, change doesn't really happen because the end result or the truth of it was always true underneath. It was just unrecognizable. And so there's discovery that is happening. Um, Change happens when you're trying to go from one path to another. And so,
Mhm.
from a human perspective, yes, change is happening. Um, but change happens in dramatic ways. Now, there are two belief systems that human beings kind of have around growth and discovery. And for the most part, human beings believe that it seems to be like a not a cultural, but a species program that change happens through trauma and drama. Authentic change only happens through trauma and drama. Learning only happens through trauma and drama. I do not agree with that. We don't have to traumatize ourselves. We don't have to injure ourselves into change. Instead, I believe that play and exploration and therefore invitation. And so
Mhm.
throughout life, we go through these different initiations, and they're basically these turning points where a new story starts, or a new pathway becomes available to you, or a new expression of yourself becomes available. So a lot of the stuff we work on, especially in our core work or the preliminary courses for our programs, it's all about those initiations, those triggers for change in your expression. Now, when it comes to those initiations, like I said, they can happen through trauma and drama if you believe that's the only thing you can listen to. But my argument is that trauma and drama is not the default, it's the kind of fallback plan because those invitations are happening as opportunities. But if things need to get really loud before you pay attention to them, they get more and more aggressive each time that invitation comes. And so those invitations to change can be gentle, they can be playful, they can be opportunities for you to expand into them, or they can get loud and aggressive and undeniable. It depends on when you're tuned to actually respond. And so genuine change happens in life when you go from one trajectory, one pathway, one expression to another one. Now, how that happens is usually dramatic if you believe that trauma and drama are the only ways to do it. It has to be an obvious, marked difference between expression to new expression. But humans are creatures of habit. We are built by our experiences throughout our lives. And so when something dramatic happens, like a sudden change happens, in the East, there is like Eastern Asia, not Eastern Canada, but in the East, there's a saying that if someone changes suddenly, they'll die. And the reason they say that, one of the reasons they say that is because it's unsustainable. If you change too suddenly, it's not going to stick. So either the sudden change is a sign that something is wrong and you're about to die, or you can't sustain it and you won't want to go back. And so genuine change happens when you can create stable and sustainable change, which usually means it happens incrementally. And so in my book, Get Strixed, which is a free ebook that's given at the beginning of any course, in that, it's also available on my website. In it, it describes that there are 3 layers to change for it to be sustainable. The first one is to debride, where you have to deconstruct the old programming, the constraints that are holding you, that holding pattern that is creating your familiar expressions. That gets deconstructed, which leaves you kind of in no man's land. It's uncomfortable for humans to be there, so usually they will just default back to whatever they were doing before because it's more comfortable. But in that no man's land, there's a delay before the new thing can happen. And the reason is it's like when you stir up in water, you stir up the dirt in the bottom of a pond, everything gets murky, you can't see anything, you have to wait for clarity. And so this integration stage happens where everything settles and becomes real to you. Once that becomes real, then you can build the new thing. What human beings think need to happen is that a new idea comes and then you just jump on it. But if you haven't got rid of the old programming, those two things are in competition. And that inner battle is what creates the trauma and drama in someone's life. So learning through trauma and drama is actually usually, in my argument, is actually a sign that things were done in the wrong order. You weren't actually ready for that new thing. The readiness to create stable change means that old program has to not be in competition with your new expression. Otherwise, you're constantly challenging yourself to try and prove a point that the new thing and convince yourself that the new thing is actually a thing you can be doing. And so for genuine change to happen, you have to deconstruct the old thing, which does not have to be a huge thing, whole process. And then you have to integrate, allow it to become real. And then from that solid footing, you can then build into that new expression. And so it's always some variation of those 3 things. And everyone does all 3 of those things in a different way. And so my core courses walk people through how to do those different stages and how to explore their own mechanisms, their own psychology to know what works for them and what doesn't work for them. Because it's not cookie cutter. Even though there is like a process and it is a reliable 3-stage process, everyone needs to approach it differently because we are unique, whole, and complete beings that are very complex. And so it's not like do this, this, that. It's okay, this needs to be done, but here are your ways of doing that. And so in the beginning, it's a bit of play and experimentation to see what you're responsive to. So you know how you take in information and how to move forward. And that's why the core courses are always languages of learning, because you could take in information in any of 12 ways. And also that Get Strixed, which explains how human psychology actually shifts to receive new information. And then it all builds from there.
Wonderful. Thank you.